August 30th, and ask if there are any modifications to the agenda. No, hearing none, we will just get right into 3A, which is Gary Brooks is going to give us a presentation.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you, committee members. Tonight before you, we're going to do a brief presentation on the Our Places, Our Play Parks and Recreation Master Plan for Beaumont, and we're doing that for review, feedback, and informational purposes. You know, as Council is aware, the master plan allows the town of Beaumont to strategically guide and manage the direction of recreation, its parks and facility services through to 2029. So with me today, we have Justin Russo from Expedition Management, who's going to run through the process of what's going to happen over the next year plus with the master plan. And as we're going to be getting ready in September to start hitting the public and user groups, etc., with our public engagement, we thought it prudent to provide an update to Council. And so I'm going to call Justin up to the screen, and he has a presentation he's going to go through. And after his presentation, we'll open it up to Council question.
Thank you.
So, Lorelei.
Welcome, Mr. Russo.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Okay. So just for the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to go through a bit of a formal presentation here that would describe who our team is working on your behalf over the next 10 months to a year on the master plan, and also to go through some of the activities that will be happening over that time period, and then of course opportunity for questions. So the goal of this presentation is to inform Council primarily about what's going to be happening during the public engagement process. And we do have a fairly robust engagement process that will include input from the public, stakeholders, yourselves, and so we just want to talk a little bit about that as well as the other inputs that will be going into the plan. Just thought we'd take a few minutes and introduce the team that we have in place to execute the master plan. So Expedition Management Consulting is a lead firm. I'm the managing director of Expedition. We've done recreation, parks, and culture master plans across Western Canada, and pleased to be doing one right here at home. And so we'll be the lead firm working with Lees and Associates, who are landscape architects. So they're a leading architect firm out of Vancouver. And so we've worked with them on several projects in the past, as we're excited to have them as on this one. We're also working with Dialogue Partners, who are actually community engagement specialists out of Sherwood Park. And so they'll be assisting with the engagement component of the overall process. We have Bannister Research as well on board, who will be doing the statistically valid telephone survey. Aviatrix Design will make sure all the documents and the final document are pretty and nice and easy to read. We also have Rob Copeland with Copeland and Associates, who's an architect, who will be able to help with some of the capital costing on indoor facilities. And Karen, who's a cultural consultant, who will be providing input on the cultural aspects of the plan. So we handpicked this group. We feel confident in this group, and looking forward to getting rolling on the main parts of the plan. In terms of our team's guiding principles, in terms of moving through this process, we want to make sure that the engagement is very innovative, and that we are making sure that we listen to residents and they feel heard. We want to make sure that the firm principals are involved in each stage of the project, and we get a start on that next week actually, where we have a whole host of our team coming to Beaumont to go through the engagement plan, and also to tour some facilities and talk about opportunities and challenges. We want to make sure that the decisions are data driven, and that anything we bring forward is supported by and documented by the information that we heard and the research that we've done in the analysis, and that positions you well in the future for making your decisions and justifying those decisions. We want to make sure that any solutions brought forward are made in Beaumont solutions, not made in somewhere else solutions, so that it's a custom-made sort of plan. and that the results are useful and defensible, and that there's a strong implementation component, so the plan doesn't end up being a doorstop but actually gets used, right? The purpose of the overall plan is to identify recreation parks, facility services, needs, and opportunities in the town, and I guess more importantly, provide guidance for you over the next 10 years. It's 10-year scope to 2029, and when we look out to 10 years on a medium growth scenario, we're looking at about 30,000 people in Beaumont. So we're not only looking at needs for today, but also needs for tomorrow. In terms of planning considerations, we want to make sure that we link to the vision of Beaumont. We know that Beaumont's changing, evolving, growing. There's been tons of growth over the past number of years, and we know that recreation parks and culture can play a central role in enhancing quality of life. But where is Beaumont going over the next 10 years, and how are we plugging into that? How are we supporting that overall vision? Also integrating with other plans. We know the social master plan, for example, is happening at the same time as this, and we want to make sure that those two plans talk to each other and other plans as well, and that they're integrated. We know that there's resource challenges. Every municipality has resource challenges, not unlike any resident has resource challenges. With Beaumont, we know that there's a fair reliance on the residential tax base, so that puts a little more pressure on it, and there's some new costs coming up with the Aquafit Center that will impact all services really in terms of your resource availability, so we'll need to keep that in mind. The appropriate balance of services, so is the services that you are offering now, are they the appropriate services for the future? Is it the right balance? The next one is regional considerations. We, of course, work closely with your partners. We know that there's lots of growth happening with Leduc County, the City of Leduc, City of Edmonton. What are they doing in terms of supply of recreation facilities, and how does that impact what you're doing? And again, community engagement being a critical part of this, and data-based decision making. In terms of the timeline, we've actually been busily working over the summer here on getting the project work plan together, but we're in phase 1 right now, data gathering and analysis, and that'll occur over the next little while, and that'll transition into phase 2, which is the engagement phase, happening through fall, late fall, and before Christmas. And then the priorities, initial priorities happening after Christmas, with spring being a draft master plan, and with the final master plan before summer. Now it's a fairly assertive schedule, and we'll be driving towards it, but we'll make sure that if more time is needed, we will take it. Just wanted to take a few minutes now and go into a few more details on what's happening in each phase. So as I mentioned, we're in phase 1 right now, the data gathering and analysis phase, and next week we have the consultants coming in and speaking, doing a workshop with your staff, tours, identifying what's working and not working in terms of service delivery, and with facilities, what's working and not working, as well as looking at the draft stakeholder engagement plan and public engagement plan and getting input on that. We're also looking at all your documents that you have in place right now, all the data that you have, and your staff so far have been great in providing that in a timely manner, so that's been a really good start. And looking at available lands, trends, and best practices. So it's all this sort of data mining at this stage. Phase 2, the public and stakeholder engagement. We have a meeting planned with you in September, third week of September, where we'll talk a little bit more about the engagement plan, what's happening, and get some more input. There's also information presentation that'll happen. We envision actually a bit of a party atmosphere, a community event that we'd like to do as part of all this. So often these engagements sort of seem a little bit stuffy, and a few people cycle through and they're either maybe not all that successful. We're trying something a little bit different here in terms of doing it on like a weekend and an afternoon, a Saturday or Sunday, making it attractive to families and the general public to come with activities like Draw the Future. So we're going to have a graphic facilitator who's excellent at sort of translating ideas into written form and having people actually participate in that artwork, and at the end of it having a piece of art that actually represents what you want to be in the future. And we also building the future. We're talking about doing that as well, and whether it be Lego or another medium, and focus groups going on at the same time, as well as information presentations, and then the traditional sort of boards and sort of feedback gathering at a table. So it's kind of, as well as some other recreational aspects that we might throw into it to make it more of a fun atmosphere. During this period, we're also completing a statistically valid telephone survey. That's 400 interviews that will be completed by Bannister. A stakeholder survey, stakeholder sessions, and we want to meet with some of the boards, like at their regular board meetings, and get on their agenda and actually present the plan and get their input, as well as some group meetings. And so there should be lots of opportunity for stakeholders, groups to become involved, as well as the general public. Interviews will also be happening during this period. And all stakeholder groups, for example, will have an opportunity to either get interviewed or meet with us in some way, shape, or form. So there shouldn't be anyone left behind. The community roadshow is where we're going to go out to the facilities with a pop-up display and talk to people, and then meeting with seniors. We would definitely want to do that, and we definitely want to have coffee and cake, because that's generally what works. And similarly with the youth, pizza, we'll be bearing pizza for sure. And then council input during this phase. And then all that will be rolled up in a What We Heard report. There are a few important dates that we want to sort of make sure that we understand. The phone survey happening in mid-October to the end of October. The stakeholder survey happening over that same period of time. And then in-person engagements happening in late October, early November. So then just shifting here into phase 3. So we've now had an opportunity to look at the demand for facilities, programs, and parks. And we've also had a chance to look at the supply and the service delivery of all of those, and we've had a chance to speak with people and understand what their needs are. So we're at a point now where we can start drafting a vision, identifying the opportunities and challenges that you have, plugging in the trends and how they fit into all of this, and then looking at the nitty-gritty of your facility utilization and how you're meeting that demand, and looking at future facility locations in open space. Lots going on in phase 3. This is really the backbone of the master plan as you move forward. So looking at strategic partnerships, which we know is critical for the delivery of recreation, parks, and cultural services, funding strategies, your delivery model, your capital plan, and your priorities. And all this is rolled up in a preliminary priorities report that will be reviewed with you before we develop the draft plan. So taking input from that process, we'll be in a position to develop the draft plan in phase 4. At that stage, we would come back to you as a council and review it with you. We would also review it with the public and get their input through various stakeholder sessions and another community roadshow. And at this stage, we also want to identify some planning tools, triggers for new facility and program development, for example. That will be an important part of your implementation. After we get feedback on the draft plan and make amendments and get a fine point on the implementation plan and all of that, we will be now at a point where we'll have the final master plan. And there'll be 2 documents, one a big one that for people that really like to read, and then a smaller one for 95% of the people who will look at it. It'll be very graphically rich and easy to understand and easy to communicate with your stakeholders, and then presentation of the plan. We want to make the point here that there's community engagement through each phase of the process, through all 5 phases we have touch points. And so it's not like we're just sort of going out at the beginning and then squirreling away in a dark room and then coming back at the end and surprising everybody with stuff. So it's not going to happen that way. We're going to have lots of touch points along the way and keep communication lines open. At the end of it, the project will develop a recreation, parks, and facilities master plan that will provide guidance to council and administration in making decisions that best meet the needs of the community through 2029, 10-year period. A document that is visionary, clear, useful, and defensible. So that's what we're going to measure success by, is these things. Any questions?
Thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. I'm sure there's several questions. Who'd like to go first? Councilors? Anybody? Hello? Okay, Stephen. It's unusual, isn't it? Councilor Newman-Curtis.
Yeah, nobody wants to go first, yeah. Simple question, I guess. Timeline you put forward is about 10 months thereabouts. Is that fairly standard to complete one of these in a community of our size, or is it done faster or slower, or where are we at with comfort level around the timing for that?
Yeah, well, some communities are super aggressive on these and they'll do them in 6 months. Some are not as aggressive. They'll take a year and a half. 10 months is assertive, but it's doable for your community, for your size of community, definitely. Cool. But it's going to everybody involved. I find it a bit easier to do it in a little tighter timeline, honestly, because it keeps enthusiasm. Kind of with the input they gave in phase 1, and you come back to phase 3, oh yeah, all fresh.
No user groups left behind. I typed out in. I want to highlight yellow. That have put into this, so we'll encourage them as well to reach out. But that's very important.
Okay, good. Are you a Trolls fan?
What's that?
Trolls? Do you know the movie? No, you don't, probably. No. Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm with you, buddy.
Yeah.
I had it when I was young too.
Unfortunately, I'm with you. Yeah. I got it.
Councilor Van Dyke? Nope. Anyone else? Questions?
Sure.
Councilor Stout?
You made a reference to a telephone interview survey. It was statistically valid, I think, if I remember what you said.
Yeah.
Could you explain?
Well, there will be doing 400.
Be a better option
Yeah.
to focus on how do we deliver service and get a big neighbor to the north and our neighbors to the east and west of us to throw some money into a decent sized $200, $300 million rec center that services the whole southern area than just our 30,000 people.
Oh, those are big numbers.
I was going to say, don't think small.
Well, the rate of Edmonton's annexation applications, and so yeah, we're going to be looking at 250,000 people living in south of the Henday, including us. So,
But yes, the regional consultation is important, absolutely,
Yeah, so
and the supply. Yeah.
so the regional piece is going to be key, which leads me to the economic development piece, because well laid out, well thought out tournament centers bring in business. Hotels, which also satisfies a major push from this council to economic develop things. So as you're going through deciding what the needs are and where things go, and it sort of needs to mesh with those plans as well, from my point of view. Because if we can put 4 ice rinks together in a spot that's a tournament center, and all of a sudden that's bringing in tournaments, which brings in hotels, which brings in shopping, which brings in other amenities.
Right.
So it's all sort of feeds. appointments. Yeah, I guess we had 2. I'll sort of like
It might come back to you.
if I get a third one, I'll be back.
Okay, okay. Anyone else? Seb?
Yeah,
Councilor
firstly,
Swain, excuse me. Be so
thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, thank you for the presentation. Personally, I've been looking forward to this since day one. Well overdue and very much needed. And I came in before when I saw it was on the agenda. I had a whole bunch of questions ready to go, and you've answered them all the way through here. So I don't have any questions for you, but I just want to say thank you and looking forward to getting going on this. So particularly around your efforts around the engagement piece. Try not to have a stale open house with the same 3 people coming in. Any efforts we can do to improve on that, I appreciate. So looking forward
It's
to
it can be a challenge, for sure.
Thank you. You want to go next? Bill?
My questions were answered.
Been answered?
Thank you.
Back to you.
Okay, I have one more. I remember what it was. It's an actual question this time. Master plans are generally very high level. How tactical are we going to get with this? Because sort of my vision at the end of this is have something that's executable, like really executable,
Yeah.
versus something that's more, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, now make a bunch of decisions and do some more research. So sort of walk me down to where we're going to land.
Yeah, that's, I agree with you. The last thing you sort of need is a motherhood statement that everyone can agree to and that doesn't provide any direction. That wasn't in the RP, wasn't in our proposal, and it wasn't sort of the agreement here. So implementation is important in terms of getting action items that are specific enough that'll give you direction, but maybe not too specific to tie your hands to, so it's that balance, right? And that it is going to be a back and forth as we move through to see what level you really want to be at. But definitely we want it to be as tactical as you need it to be.
Thank you. Okay, I was going to throw some in, but go right ahead.
Go ahead if you'd like.
Just really one that's standing out for me right now, and that is the scope, kind of a scope question. In the presentation, you mentioned that, I think her name was Karen, is going to be looking after cultural aspects.
Yeah.
So library, arts and culture, are those in scope for this plan? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was why we brought Karen on, because we did realize that culture would be coming forward as a sort of a need, I think, for this community coming, and we'll be hearing that through the engagement process. So that culture will be intertwined with the whole thing, and it'll be part of it. There'll be a section about culture. We try not to treat culture all on its own, though, integrate it as much as possible. You see many times it's just completely isolated, and then often culture loses because they're not part of bigger facilities and not integrated into the overall planning process. So we want to make sure it's integrated as much as possible, but given its due course as well.
And you did say library was included as well. I saw the head shake. Good. Councillor Van Newkirk?
Just more of a comment more than anything. When you're looking to connect with people, one of the simple things that I say that isn't as simple sometimes, but go where the people go. So we have a bunch of upcoming community events as we go through this timeline here that you're talking about for stakeholders and stuff. And I think our community events tend to gather lots of people to them, and you might consider ponying along to some of that. So I'm sure you can talk with Kerry and his team about when some of those milestone events are, and figure out how many people go and what the target audiences might be.
Good suggestion.
Friendly suggestion.
Yeah.
I did have one further note that I made just on timing. On our agenda as well tonight, we're talking about timing around the aquafit and the consultation happening right at the same time, the phone survey. And depending on where we land on that, there may be some impacts on people's feelings about recreation at that point. So I just want to put that out there. I don't think that's a showstopper, but I think it should be perhaps in the introduction, or give the people on the phone that are talking to people a heads up. If this comes up, here's the answer, or something like that.
Yes.
But I do think people, depending on which way we go, any which way we go, people don't like to see their facilities closed down for anything, even if it's a good thing. So find out.
Can affect their answers, yes. Their perception at that point in time.
Exactly. I think it will have an impact on some. Okay.
Just regarding the engagement that's going on, if you could, I appreciate it's not our place, council's place, to engage with you and work with you on the question specifically. But if you could just keep us informed on what you're asking people, when you're asking them, so that we know. And we often get a lot of questions, as you can imagine. But as long as we know what, it'd be good to know what you guys are asking them, so that we have that background knowledge. So just keeping us in the loop for information only, and I'll do my best to resist commenting on it. But yeah, just keep us in the loop would be appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think those are our questions for now, unless I've missed somebody, but no, I don't think so. Do you need a motion, Mr. Hiltz, or can we just...
For information.
Just for information. Okay, so then we move right on to the next one. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very good presentation. Okay. Next up is Aquafit Phase 2 construction phasing overview.
So as part of the, so thank you, committee members. As part of the process of coming to the September 11th council discussion on moving forward with the Aquafit Phase 2 this fall, we engaged Clark Builders to be the construction management firm to kind of work through the initial processes to get everything up and kind of running in a very short time frame. Part of that whole process was to look at what can and can't happen and what are some of the pitfalls, et cetera, as they're working through the process. So what we wanted to do before the September 11th meeting is to have an open and transparent conversation with elected officials of some of the information that they have found around the construction phasing for the Aquafit Phase 2, and also some of the unknowns that could impact the project in the future. This is kind of a unique situation because usually what happens is you get approval to move forward with the project, then you kind of go through this process, and then after the fact approval's there, these things start coming up, and then we're meeting every couple of weeks with this is another update, this is an update, but we're moving forward with the project. This is kind of one that we're kind of working with that we haven't quite got the final approval yet, but we're working through this process, so it's timely discussions. As we're working through this very quickly, we thought that this was a good time to do this. One of the goals, through this whole process, and something to kind of try to keep in mind as we kind of look at this is the end result is basically a very modernized expansion of the Aquafit Center that's going to include a brand new NHL rink, a new field house, a gymnasium, a climbing wall, and improvements to the Aquafit Center itself. So I think it's important to keep that scope in mind as we kind of go through the phasing options tonight. We're not looking for a decision tonight. That will come on September 11th. This is about feedback. This is about getting some of that engagement out there, getting your thoughts on the process, etc. As Councillor Barnhout indicated, people do not like to see the facilities closed, but sometimes it's a necessary evil to get to where our end goal is. So I have with me tonight, we have Clark Builders who will be kind of presenting the phasing. We have Jim Carey from BR2 who will be talking about contextual processes through the design process and moving forward. And we have Avis and Young and E-Communications here to talk a bit about the communication plan. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Clark Builders, and they're going to run through the three phasings. We're going to ask to keep your questions until we get through each of the presentations, and that way we won't get hung up on one area. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Jeremy Carousel, so I'm the project manager for the project, and really excited to be in front of you tonight to hopefully provide some answers on, the phasing of this project, and also get some questions back so that I can provide you with some answers here. So moving forward into this thing, we are looking. Does this thing go down as well?
Unfortunately, we don't have a PowerPoint.
Okay.
So we can't.
You're going to control that?
Control it.
All right. Oh, is it a point? You're controlling it? Perfect. Thank you. So as we take a look at the construction of the Aquafit facility, there was some decision framework that had to be put in place to sort of come up with how the phasing of this project would happen. So knowing that there is an intent to keep the existing facility operational during construction, we were taking a look at public safety. Obviously with a existing building and occupants inside of it during construction, that was first and foremost, one of the most important things that we looked at, quality of construction, project budget, project schedule, patron access, and ease of construction. So all of these played a factor in the way that we structured the phasing of the project. So project considerations and risks, these are things that came up as we were working through the construction documents, taking a look at them and understanding. There is utility tie-ins into the existing building with the existing services on site. We've got electrical, we've got storm lines, sanitary lines, water lines. There's constructability, there's unforeseen issues, there's a potential for weather delays, there is the availability of trades to accommodate the phasing. So we're also looking at U.S. tariffs and material availability. There is local emergency services requirements, so we've met with the fire marshal, had some discussions on how that process would work as we move through the different phases of construction. There is obviously going to be building system disruptions, sprinkler, HVAC, fire alarm, electrical and plumbing. So all of these things play a factor, so you're going to see some dates in here, and these dates are obviously approximations and subject to change as we move through the process. Obviously, we try and stick as close to the schedule as possible, but obviously there are unforeseens that are unknown, and we will have to just cross those bridges as we get there. So, option one of the construction phasing, the intent would be that we would close off the south parking lot down at the very bottom there in red, as well as the south vehicle access, and the temporary dog park would also close immediately as of October 1st. The facility would, the Aquafit facility would remain open until June 1st of 2019. So during that phase, we would be forging ahead with doing foundations and steel erection, and that facility would remain open. There is going to be some moving around of patrons during that process. So basically from June 1st through September 30th, the intent would be that we would close the Aquafit facility to allow for us to do tie-ins to the existing structure. There is mechanical, electrical, sprinkler systems, there's an elevator shaft. There's all sorts of components having two sides of this building connected to a new structure. We're looking at opening the facility back up again in October 1st, 2019 through to May 31st, 2020. So the other key point about the site, and it's good that we're on here, is that window of June 1st to September 30th, that is construction season for the summer months. So that is when you get done your site work. That's your paving and everything. So that's the other reason why we would shut down the facility during that time. It would allow us to have complete control of the site. You don't have patrons parking there and having to shift people around, so we could just forge ahead with getting that work done. And then, so the facility would open again October 1st, 2019 through March 31st, 2020, and then it would close again April 1st, 2020 until the end of the project, and that would allow us to do the final mechanical system tie-ins, because the mechanical system that is in the new facility is going to be basically replacing the old equipment. And then basically July 17th, 2020 is when the new Aquafit would open. So there are some pros and cons to both of these. The pros are that this option keeps the facility open the longest for your patrons, right? You have in the initial phase where it stays open until June 1st, 2020, and then it's closed for a 4-month stint, but then it opens up again for a 6-month window. There is some cons to it. It is the longest schedule, so it takes longer for us to do the work, given the fact that there is interruptions. I have down here greatest cost, but I should have maybe reworded that and said this has the least amount of cost savings. There are temporary hoardings and entrances that would have to be built. There's additional public safety measures that are required. Ongoing facility disruptions. It has the greatest operational cost because your facility remains open during that period. And then there's the greatest staff turnaround demands as well. If you can move to the next slide. This is taking a look at the interior components of the building. So Initially, October 1st, it would result in the closure of the main floor washrooms. It would close off the north and south stairs, the elevator, the second floor entirely, so the fitness area is completely closed to the public, and then the child care program space would close in the bottom left-hand corner down there. During the time of October 1st through November 30th, that's when we would be constructing a new south entrance in the green section there, because that's going to be the new entrance for your patrons. And then we would open that entrance on December 1st, 2018, and that would be the entrance that would remain in place while the facility was open until the closure of the project, or the end of the project. And basically, we would shut down the component that is in purple up at the top there that identifies the entrance as well as the lobby as it stands now. December 1st, moving on, it is again capturing that June 1st to September 30th closure of the entire facility. And again, just the reopening and then the closure at the tail end to tie in the mechanical systems and everything else, and then the opening of the facility. If you can move to option number 2. So option number 2, this one basically is very similar to option 1, where we are still closing the south parking lot and the dog park and the south vehicle entrance. And this would also close the facility from June 1st, 2019, but then it would not reopen again until the end of the project. And then the project would open June 21st of 2020. So there's a savings of time on the schedule. So that is one of the pros. You have a schedule savings of approximately a month. There's general conditions savings. So as a contractor, we wouldn't be on site for that period of time. So there's savings on the dollar amount. There's also a reduction in operating costs. And then the facility does remain open until summer of 2020. So we thought that that was a pro. There's also a con because the public, it's closed to the public from June 1st, 2019 through to the end of the project. There's still the requirement of the temporary entrance and hoardings. There's still a requirement for additional public safety measures just because we are in a connected building that's operational. Ongoing facility disruptions, and there's some staff turnaround demands. If you can move on to the next slide. Again, not much change on this slide. It's just basically identifying that the closure date is from June 1st, 2019 all the way through. We can move on to option 3. Option 3 is, it is one that basically indicates that as of October 1st, 2018, the facility would be closed entirely to the public. And then it would open again June 1st or June 21st of 2020. Now, this has got a schedule savings of approximately 1 month. There is the greatest amount of general conditions savings. There is no requirement for temporary entrances, hoardings. There's no additional public safety measures required because the facility is occupied. There's the greatest reduction in operational costs, and there's no ongoing facility disruptions. And obviously the major con here would be that the facility is close to the public with little notice very quickly. So, and the interior, it's basically indicating that it's closed right from the October 1st, and that it's incorrectly labeled, I see, on the floor plan there. But move on to the next slide. That's a facility. So that's taking it to a close there.
So I'm going to turn it over to Jim for a minute.
Okay.
He's going to talk about some context before I bring up the communication.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. So where we're at this stage is just to step back a little bit. Let's go back up to 30,000 feet. We are nearing completion of phase 1 of the construction manager's contract for pre-construction services. When Clark comes back in a couple weeks, they will have a fixed number to build the facility, and that will be driven partially by which option we choose today for partially opening or closing the facility. The numbers haven't all come in yet. We're being sent back questions and options and alternates from all the various bidders to the various disciplines as, what about this? Can we look at that? We're trending close depending on what options we find primarily with foundations and how we choose to maybe make some changes to steel, right now it looks like we are very close to our number without a contingency. We need to, as a team, bring back 3 to 4%, I think, to this project to keep us at the 29.5. So that said, during the design, we did have a phasing plan. And our phasing plan for the building itself is very much the same. There really aren't an awful lot of options in terms they're driven by life safety and exiting, and where the doors are, where the street is, where's the fire hydrant, how does the firefighter get in. So those are very common to what we saw and what Clark came back with. Where it is different is that in our plan, we were able to initially suggest saving the parking lot where the footprint of the field house is now. And that would have given maybe 100 parking stalls, and it was making the opening of the facility a little more appealing from a public service. No matter what option we were to choose tonight or over the next week, the impact on the interior of the facility, maintaining the swim program as it is today, is not going to be altered. What is going to be altered is the distance to the parking lot and the number of stalls. Now, given that we are on we're trending as a very tight number, if we were to follow the BR2 plan and save parking, we're going to split the general conditions. We're going to add potentially, we think, 3 months to the construction and remobilizing the piling and foundation and remobilizing the steel. Given that we're looking at a 25% tariff on steel right now, we think we're going to be in excess of $2 million over budget. So with that sobering comment, the BR2 plan is nowhere near as attractive as it once was, given that impact on both schedule and cost. Whoever's plan we were to decide tonight, so we really had 4 options. We have the 3 you saw tonight, and the original BR2 one, which had parking spots in the footprint. That's going to add significant cost to the project and significant time. So the intermediate solution would be is what Clark's come up with, which I think is a very valid option, whether we use options. Option 3 is obviously from the construction side. Let's pick option 3. We can close the facility completely, build it as quickly as possible, save this money, which would be for the hoarding and life safety and temporary fire connections, etc., but no swim program for the duration. The middle of the road, whether you choose option 1 or option 2, from my perspective, what's going to drive that decision is going to be the location of the parking and the distance to parking. And bear in mind that the facility will close initially in November and run through the winter, which is the prime swim program, and also when it's cold and I'm marching my wet head 3 kids and the wet backpacks around the corner, up the street to the parking lot. And that's the bugaboo. There is no other. We had, at one time, we thought maybe we could take some land out of the ravine and make temporary parking. Maybe we could take it across the street. All those options have disappeared. So I think the hard choice, in having done 3 or 4 major recreation additions and keeping things open, the hard thing is keeping public expectation in line with reality of construction and making sure that we are on point with that message consistently and not overselling temporary facilities. People grow weary of hoarding and fencing and I think the one thing just to really we need to be right now put on the table is that over the winter months, how will the public react to making that walk, which will be probably 2 city blocks by the time we come around the corner, up the side and get to the parking lot in the winter. And we can mitigate that. Maybe there is some kind of shuttle, maybe there would be plans for temporary handicap drop-off at the front, you know, et cetera, but the reality is that's where the parking will be.
Thanks.
So I'm going to call up Davis Young and E-Communications to just go.
We're saving all our questions
go
for
home
the
now.
end. No, don't you leave.
That was a nice try.
This discussion hasn't even started yet.
Go there, and you can use this PowerPoint. You can
Gary told us we can't ask questions until we hear from everybody, so that's what we're waiting for. But it's building, Carrie, it's building. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So I'm using this, is that correct? Perfect. So really quickly, because this project itself has so much transformational character for the town of Beaumont, Davis & Young was brought in as a strategic resource when it comes to the communication of this project. And so there's three things that we want to talk to you about tonight, basically how we're going to help deliver the information in a streamlined fashion and in a consistent fashion as well, specifically for the development of the communications plan. So we're going to dive into the strategy development, the channel identification, and the mitigation strategy. So there's lots of things that you've already heard from the construction team and the architecture team that you can hear there's different routes, and through those routes there's different mitigation options that could exist. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to kind of take a deeper dive into each one of these three as we build out the plan for just the next 4 weeks. So basically once council decides whether we go left or whether we go right, making sure that we have the content, we have the channels, and we have the right people knowing what to say and what to write for the immediate term.
So this is very high level. Of course, we didn't want to get into too many of the specifics at this point. We know that whichever route is chosen, it will affect user groups of the facility. One of our main goals is that maintaining transparency throughout the project is of the utmost importance to guide our next steps and future courses of action. And the need was recognized for a strategic communications plan to be developed to reach our customers in a timely fashion. Some of the channels that we'd like to use, of course, include social media. This will include some of the Facebook groups that residents are connected to, Twitter posts, and YouTube videos. This can help to show the progress of construction and decision-making as it happens. A central location on beaumont.ab.ca will be the location for all project updates, information to be housed. This is so that we can drive back all of the traffic from any of our communications channels back to this spot. And residents can find or look back at the history of the project as it develops. Community road signs are also another channel that can be effective, as well as facility posters and flyers. Another area that we'd like to focus on is by providing content to the newspaper for articles, feature stories, and ads as things progress. Some of our mitigation strategies include that, of course, we want to limit interruptions to programming as much as possible. Beaumont staff will work with users to accommodate requests to the best of our ability. And with our key partners, the town of Beaumont will strive to develop a balanced approach to maintain services. We're going to work closely with local fitness providers, staff, and our partner municipalities from City of Leduc, City of Edmonton to create these options.
Thank you. Wow, that was a quick one.
So I'll just call up Lear 2 and Clark Builders to come up front here, and then we have questions, and I can bring back Avis and E-Communications if we have any comments on communications.
For sure. Okay, so ready for questions at this point? Who's ready to go first? Councillor Denlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you again for the presentation. It's very informative and lots of information to digest, and I will be the first to admit I've never been involved in a project of this nature before, so I've got some questions that may seem not too informed, but I will try and go through it in a moment here. The biggest thing you mentioned was the parking issue. With option 1, with the closure of the parking, Jimmy mentioned there could be some people walking or so on, but I'm looking at the timing of the parking closure. First closure being June 1st to September is the bulk of the summer season. So I think if it was, say January or November to January or something, when it's 35, 40 below around here, you got to haul your kids around on the street, sidewalks have to be cleaned, way more of a challenge than June to September in the first closure. The second being April to July, second closure also the more of a summer season. I don't think that's much of an issue with people having to walk if it had been winter. I do think the closure times, if they were chosen by Clark specifically or not, I know our Triton swimming team is a world-class swimming team here in Beaumont, and they can come out of the Aquafit. I'm not too sure when the swimming season ends, but I'm pretty sure the first closure in June probably will not disrupt their season much as it would be if it was all through January, February, March. So my first comments on the options here is that the closures do seem to be reasonably well thought out from terms of weather, accessibility for people getting around the facility, as well as taking into account our users, especially the Triton Swimming Club that is very specifically geared towards the pool, obviously. So my first comments, I am leaning towards personally option 1 to mitigate the amount of closure time. Option 3 has its merits from a construction perspective, but in the entirety closing the facility for its entirety, I think is not a reasonable, although a construction option to be discussed, not feasible from many user perspectives. That's my first comment for now. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Van Newkirk and then Councillor...
Sure, I'll start with just one big picture question. I've got quite a few, and I'm sure others do too. When I reviewed everything, I was surprised to see that option 3 maintained the timeline that it did. We're shutting, that proposal shut the facility, but there seemingly weren't gains on timeline for that. Can you maybe speak to that?
Just given the size of the facility, these projects take a long time to get completed. So even the integration between those two components, there is not, it's not a huge amount of work as those things are tied together. I mean, there's scope of work that needs to happen, but you don't pick up a whole lot of time in the overall schedule. So we're looking at it more of, just trying to get the work done with the least, impact to users, other than the fact that if the facility is closed, instead of having to move hoardings around back and forth and having that integration between the two groups, right?
Further? Sure.
Yeah, I guess my point is that if you have an unimpeded site, how come it doesn't go faster? That's my big picture point with this, right? And a lot of people
absolutely
put some comment forward.
So the differences in the schedules, sorry, I should introduce myself too. My name's Brent Simonik with Clark. The differences between the schedules is with the third option, there's no requirement to build a temporary entrance or temporary hallways, temporary emergency exit corridors around the outside of the building. There's no requirement to relocate like the fire alarm annunciator panel, Siamese connection, that sort of thing. That's where the savings and schedule comes, because that's literally one of the first things we have to do when we come to site is prep all those areas. It's about a month worth of work to get that done so that we can start on the work on the outside of the building and provide a safe access for all the patrons in the pool. The actual nuts and bolts of the project don't really change otherwise, right? So it's the same amount of work, same schedule.
Okay. Councillor Monkhoff-Swain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, welcome. It's an exciting project for us, and happy to have you guys on board, so thanks. It's been an interesting 24 hours, I'll say that much. So I just want to make a few comments before I get into a long laundry list of questions, and I'll leave it to you to manage my questions as usual. So first, I just wanted to acknowledge, the amazing permanent and part-time staff that we have that work for us here at the town. I appreciate it's been a very confusing and potentially stressful 24 hours for them. So I use the facility, my family use the facility a lot, and they always do a great job, the staff down there. So thank you to them. I also wanted to speak to the clubs and the volunteers who use the pool and gym frequently. Thank you for raising all your concerns and questions that have got to me and to other members of council. Your questions certainly and comments have been heard, and we'll be asking them all tonight here. So hopefully we'll get some of the answers that we weren't able to provide over the last 24 hours and seek direction on the best 3 options here for the community as a whole. Lastly, administration. I think we have, council has put on a very aggressive timeline for you, and I know that a lot of the challenges around the communication have been as a result of the pressures that we have put on you. So I just want to say thank you for all the work to get us to here. Certainly when we went through this conversation a couple of months back, it's great that you've been able to provide all these options in such a short amount of time. So thank you for that. First question, and I too am a pretty simple guy. So Steve's question was very, and I appreciated the answer about that. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm just curious about if you could, and maybe this is more to administration, but if you could speak to the engagement that we've had with other facilities around potential of our clubs and user groups potentially using their other facilities. You can appreciate the concern that a lot of people have with around closures and where they might go and that sort of thing. So can you just speak to some of the initial outreach that we've had with other facilities, cognizant that we haven't approved this project yet, so that you can only say so much?
So we've had, to the committee, we've had discussions with the City of Leduc regarding, both the pool and the fitness, et cetera, and being able to use those facilities. We've had probably a 10-year partnership with the City of Leduc. When they have their shutdowns and stuff, they come to the Aquafit Center. We have our shutdowns. We can go to their facility. We have had some positive discussions with them, but nothing's been finalized. We've also had some discussions with some of the private clubs in town regarding memberships and being able to use those facilities for fitness, et cetera, to those people who carry memberships. So we've had some of those preliminary discussions, but until we kind of have the finalized, then we'll get into those real nuts and bolts discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further?
Okay, the parking, to be fair, I didn't quite follow along, and so I'm wondering if you just pull back up to, we'll use option 2, if that's okay, 2 slides back. So you said there are 3 options, and then there's the BR2 option, so that's confusing me. So
when we issued the call for construction management services, we issued the complete set of contract documents, and we're about 85% complete at that time in specs, which also included a phasing plan, phasing strategy, in 4 simple steps of how we saw build this first, shut this down, and this will happen, etc., with a timeline. And on the timeline, I believe we had 24 months. 21 months is aggressive. I tip my hat. I would venture a day sooner, just based on the complexity and the size, and I think they're the experts, and 21 seems to work. With respect to the parking, where we look up at this drawing, I'll point in my direction. We have the purple building.
Can you use the pointer?
Sure.
I think. You press. Is this the button? No. I don't know. You press one of the buttons.
You press a button. This is interesting. Let's try.
No.
Okay, no worries. I just figured if it was there.
Which one do you press? Which one do you press?
You're tall enough.
There. Oh, there it is.
Put your hand up there.
Which one do you press, Eleanor?
For the laser on this one?
Yeah, there should be. They are.
It's not.
And it works on this screen.
Well, yeah, I'll do it red.
Oh, there it is.
Hey,
Oh, my God.
it's radio PowerPoint,
The
isn't it?
red button. Okay, so we have our existing building.
Only works for me.
We have an existing entranceway coming here. A portion of this was originally envisioned to remain as parking for the initial phase, while everything from including the gymnasium, the arena, and the entrance was constructed, which envisioned 2 phases of foundation work. So that would be complete, that entrance would have opened up, and then we would have come in from this direction. And then this parking lot would be abandoned, and the field house would have been built. The steel packages, there really are 3, so they are somewhat independent. There is a gymnasium, there is an arena, there's a field house. The foundations, what's come back is the cost to pile 2/3, and then 8 months later, a year later, come back and finish that piling, do 2/3 of the steel, come back later and do the remaining, and the additional complexity of the mechanical, electrical breakpoints that then have to be tapped in is adding to schedule, and it's adding to cost, which is taking us beyond the 29.5. So that's the driver right now on the table, is 29.5.
Yeah, so when you scared everyone at the table, you said an additional $2 million and an additional 3 months. That was outside of this plan. If we didn't stick to this plan. Okay, so thank you.
That's feeling better now?
So right now, and I'll steal the laser from you if you don't mind. So right now, essentially what you're saying is this south parking lot, that is closed in a month, no matter what.
October 1st, yeah.
October 1st gone. And what we're asking right now is that this is going to be the temporary parking, which is a long way to walk for sure, but we're not walking this way. We're walking out on the street, around, and up and in. Correct?
Yeah, initially for the month of October through to December 1st, I believe, you would be able to use that, there's a purple walkway that runs right down there and goes in that main entrance. So initially, that will be the entrance. How well we go and construct that bottom corner of the child play area, and then once that child play area has been developed, then patrons would need to walk all the way around on that green line on the sidewalk to come in the south. So yes, that's the long walk. Right, December 1st. I mean, that's
reality.
And that's the same regardless option 1, option 2.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Was that listed on one of the cons?
Yes.
But we didn't, I don't know if we listed that the long walk was a con,
No, 'cause I missed that in my first run through. Okay.
It is a fitness center, maybe it's a plus.
Doesn't it go to the fitness center?
It's the fitness center, actually, if I'm not mistaken, is closing
closed.
right away. Did I miss that, or is that correct? Like, the whole second floor is closed right away?
Yeah, the
Which I
fitness
think
component
also I missed the first time around, until I
Yeah,
saw it.
fitness closes
Fitness
immediately.
closes permanently in all three options.
That's correct.
The only thing staying open is the pool.
Is the pool. That's right.
And that was something that didn't jive with me the first time, so. carry
Yeah, I
on.
mean, I've got lots more, but there's a lot of more technical people that know what they're talking about here, so I'd like to hear their questions before I get into some more.
You want to hold
Yeah,
off on
I'll
some of your
defer to
questions?
the smarter guys.
Mayor Stewart, you next?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm just looking at options 1, option 2, and option 3. And so there's got to be, you've explained why there's no real schedule impacts, because quite honestly, option 3 is political suicide. If there isn't a major cost savings and a major schedule increase. So let's talk cash. How much there was a very scary statement here, like not too long ago for me, which is almost a deal killer. I'm going to be honest. We're at our 29.5 million, and we have no contingency. All right, and that's like there's no way I'm going to be very happy if you come back halfway through the project and go like $3 million bucks.
And we're going to get that contingency. We're not going to come back in 2 weeks without that.
Okay.
We're telling you where it's trending now. It's the 2 drivers that are bumping things, I've been told, is steel. And when we say steel, that's obviously the structural steel, but it's the hollow metal doors, the metal roof, it's all the rebar, it's the metal guardrails, it's all the steel studs, it's all the T-bar track. It's a lot of stuff. The second driver has been the metal roof, which we are now looking at an option to maintain the metal roof on the facade where it's visible from sightline, but on all the other components to go to a conventional SBS roof. And that will definitely be a savings. So that's where we're at right now, that we know that as we've all recognized, we can't come back in 2 weeks and say it's 29.4999 and it really didn't include the toilet partitions, right? No, we're not going to do that. It's going to come back with a contingency.
Okay, fair enough.
Or I'll go on holidays. Yeah, I won't.
Or come back, yeah. Okay, do you have another?
So getting back to like option 2, speak to me why that's a good option for you, as opposed to the full shutdown.
Yep, no, option 2, I mean, obviously, it allows us to basically just carry on with construction. There's no opening back up come October 1st through March. That allows our trades to work throughout the facility, both in the Aquafit existing building and the new areas, completely getting those all tied in right off the bat. We can work all the way through there without that public safety factor, without having to be concerned about moving hoardings back and forth. So there is a benefit on that end just to forge ahead with construction and not be impeded.
Sorry, go ahead.
Further, I think, in looking at option 2 versus option 1, one of the main benefits is, and this is what absolutely scares me, is with the opening closure, we can't meet those timelines. And then we have a group who wants to book in October 1st, and we're not meeting that timeline. We're going to throw a whole bunch of things into chaos. And so that's the thing that really actually I'm concerned, and those are, these are things that we've had discussions, and we probably have 4 hours of discussions a day with these guys. And so we have to, if we're going to go with option one, we have to have that kind of an assurance that we're going to be hitting targets, because we're going to be throwing the public through, and council, et cetera, through a lot of not meeting those dates where we promised we'd meet them. That scares me.
Gary just hit where I was going next. With the shutdowns, this is like in my other life, I spent a lot of time in the construction industry, been in a lot of renos, and I've watched creep happen on shutdowns. And I've watched bad things happen in the middle of the night on night shifts. It just all of a sudden your 2 month shutdown is through no fault of anybody, it just is what it is. My question is if you go with option 2 and you power on through, is there opportunity, once you've powered on through, to get to a point to reopen the pool portion a little early? Or is that option right off the table?
The one issue that we have with that option is like Jeremy talked about earlier on, the building and all the building systems are integrated. So fire alarm, sprinkler, HVAC, plumbing, electrical. So until the new addition is complete and the HVAC system's up and running and it's balanced and sprinklers are tied in and the fire alarm's been verified, it's hard to do that without the addition 100% complete. It's next to impossible to do that, I should say.
Actually, that is a good point.
Yeah.
The two shutdowns could adversely affect commissioning.
The first shutdown will be predominantly structural related. The second shutdown is on the schedule, which is matching our original schedule, is the new mechanical room, which is in the existing building behind the gymnasium, is where the boilers and furnaces are, the makeup air unit for the pool.
Okay.
And that, unfortunately, in the schedule comes in at the very end to get completed.
Mr. Hendricks.
Thank you. I'm a bit puzzled as to why this is being downloaded on this council. This process has been followed based on R2's approach, and certainly the approach on development of design, development of phasing, development of parking, development of timelines, and also we've gone through multiple asks on where's our budget. So we are here today. I appreciate we brought in Clark. Clark's come in now and created a whole new scenario for us. And now we're being asked politically to make the call. And you're also telling us that if we don't follow this call, we're going to get hit with it. And I really don't like the fact that money's being thrown around in here, like, well, it's $2 million and there's risk, and now there's scheduling problems. That's not my problem. Right. So why is it now becoming my problem? So we want to keep this pool open as long as possible. And somebody better figure that out. That's where we went. That's how we got here. We've got money attached to that. Clark can't get it done or can't figure it out. Then we need to go back to the process and get back to the budget. To me, it's that simple. We're not sitting here trying to figure this out as politicians. And even though I own a construction company and have been at it for 38 years, I would still sit here and say, well, why isn't Clark figuring this out? Why isn't others figuring this out? Why are we left with this so-called problem to solve? It's not a problem to solve for us. So I look forward to, and I understand we're not making decisions tonight, so I look forward to September 11th. And the numbers better be right, the process better be right, the schedule better be right, because we have put way too much time into getting here to be told now, well, there's a tariff, there's this, there. No, we've even thrown other processes and other potential ideas as to how to build this thing out. And I'm not hearing that in terms of process, so whatever, I look forward to September 11th. And if the number's not going to meet, we're not going to get to 29. We're already hearing from a mayor that says, well, it's a deal breaker, and many, many years of effort have been lost. So.
Point heard and taken. If I could comment back to some of those points. We're working on a solution. We're well aware that option 3, which I think we have to put on the table, I think you have to see it and understand it, is not going to be palatable to the community. There was never any expectation that would be, but I think it would be unfair and a disservice not to show it. options 1 and 2, making it, I think, especially, let's talk about option 1. Option 1 makes the best attempt to maintain accessibility to the operation of the pool for the prime swim class periods. Is that correct? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
It does not...
I'm sorry, which option did you say?
Option 1. Because option 1 has 2 closures, and I know we talked throughout design that regardless, there would be a shutdown closure at the end of this project because of the mechanical tie-ins. No one put a timeline whether it was 3 months or 2 months, but it would have been, I think, even very optimistically 2 months to reconnect and commission and finish whatever had to be done. Because we know from their early design reports there are structural issues, there's paint issues, there's decay, there's roofing. So no matter what, there was going to be a shutdown to the pool, and I think to be extremely generous, it would have been 2 months. We were looking at, under option 1, a closure of potentially, how many months we got there? April, May, June, July, 4 months.
Yeah.
Maybe we can strategically trim that back a bit. The first closure is structure. None of this is impossible, Perry, to keep open. I mean, I'd be the fool to tell you, we couldn't keep this facility open throughout probably the majority of phase 1. The disruptions will be, no matter what, we are putting a new elevator in, and that elevator is going where the washrooms are. I don't want to get into all the weeds of technical, but that's going to be a shutdown to that top left-hand corner of the building, and it's going to take out some, so again, it's a public service thing of the washrooms on the main floor of the public use are going to be compromised. Now, is that 4 months, 5 months, 3 months? Right now, we could debate that. The second thing is the fitness. The fitness could remain open, and it could remain open for a period of time, and that time is probably going to be 3 or 4 months, maybe 5 months before we'd hit the steel package on the roof where we really had to close it off. But the level of service, we're trying to balance what is the level of service expectation to what we're going to give you. We'll work to whatever direction we get, and if the direction is come back and do not close that pool except for the final shutdown and those components we have at the very front, then we'll come back with that schedule. But the service impact, I think, is going to be something we need to recognize, and that's going to be noise, and that's going to be dust, and that's going to be penetrating the roof for the steel connections. So we introduce some risk. We introduce risk of water migration. We introduce some risk of, again, noise, etc. If it is palatable to lose the fitness facility to the public for that 18 months, then my recommendation is you lose the fitness facility. If it is keep the pool open and have only the initial disruption and only a final shutdown, we can do that, and we're just going to have to map for you what the hoarding plan is going to be and what you expect the level of service impact to be.
Thanks for that clarification. I still think a missing piece here is the cost piece, which I know you don't want to get into, but at the same time, if you're seeking some direction, we don't know that.
No. Just for costs, I threw the cost one out for the BR2 plan to do the staggered construction, piling, etc. We can abandon that, as Clark is telling me, that is not going to fly into the cost scenario we have. That would just, what that means is there's going to be some more walking through hoarding tunnels, etc., while there's steel going up. We have to get people out 2 sides of a building. One of them is going to be through the stairs coming down through the field house. So it's going to be through tunnels. It's going to be scaffold. It's going to have string lights. It's going to have those kind of things. That we were steering away from that. Partly from a service, partly from a safety. Those things can be mitigated.
Okay, we're not talking about money at this juncture.
No.
Okay, Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
Thank you. I appreciate that this isn't a decision-making meeting, but you're looking for direction.
Yep.
I think we need to provide some clarity around option 3. I think you definitely needed to present it so that we could hear it. But in saying that, I'd like to see this council have a discussion about shutting that option down right now, and this is why. We've obviously got a lot of staff impacting. That if we wait until September 11th before we make that decision, they've only got 3 weeks, right? And we're in the middle of a regularly planned shutdown, so there's a big concern. So I don't want to leave them in the limbo for 2 more weeks if we don't have to. We've also got people who get up at 5:30 in the morning to register online, to register our kids for swimming lessons and all that sort of stuff, that are now trying to figure out, okay, do I need to go to Leduc? Right? So all these programs are taking place. So I fully respect the need to put the option forward, and I thank you for bringing it forward and answering the questions on it. To only increase the schedule by 1 month, I get the logic behind it. For me, it's not enough. Cost aside, it's a no-brainer. So, are we in a position to get rid of this, to respectfully get rid of option 3, just so that we can provide a bit more stability for our community? If we're not ready to do that, that's okay. But I'd like to put that forward, and yeah, we can have a conversation about it if others feel that we need to find out more about costs, but I think my point is made on that one. So.
Okay, you very strongly do not like option 3.
I'm going to back you up there. There is no circumstances in which I'm voting for option 3. I don't think. I can't think of them now, unless they tell me that's the only way they can meet it as budget, and even then I don't think I'd vote for it.
And so my point being is, my sense is that's where council is, so let's not drag it out and leave an extra 2 weeks for these people to be in limbo.
Yeah.
Let's make a decision and focus on option 1 and 2, and I've got a lot of questions about those two.
Hang on 1 minute. I just want to clarify that we're not making a decision here. I appreciate we're trying to give direction.
Get rid of an option.
We're not voting on it, but it sounds like there's a very strong reaction. And I'm guessing from what you said about the last 24 hours that you've heard feedback. You've had a bad day.
I've had a great day.
I'm sorry, but I don't know what has happened to you that's caused you to be as adamant about option 3 as you are. So I'm just asking for clarification if you want to give it.
I mean, if you'd like me to wax lyrical about it, I could, but I think my point is
made. Basically, people are telling you they don't want to see the permanent closure. That's what you're hearing. Is that clear?
Sure. And to
I heard it from Councillor Henderson. I just want to be sure I know what you're saying.
From an expectation perspective. So, yeah, I don't think we need to. Okay. My point is made, and if anyone else has got other direction to say no, we want to bring back option 3.
But we're not going to take a vote, is what I'm saying.
Well, the crux of what we're trying to decide here tonight is what service level are we prepared to accept? And then they will come back and schedule it early. So it may not be options 1, 2, or 3. It may be a hybrid of a bunch of things. So the question is before us is let's stop worrying about options 1, 2, and 3 and decide what level of service we're willing to put up with for our residents.
So I disagree with that. I get that there is going to be some changes between option 1, and we're not here to vote on option 1. We're going to give direction on that. But I think if we can just kick out option 3, if there's no political will to do that, let's do it now and not belabor this point for these folks. So we can definitely have a conversation about which way we're going here and what service level, and do we want them to be walking around 2 city blocks in the cold?
When you talk about service level, that is actually providing service. So that automatically takes option 3 out.
Okay, so can we take it out?
We'll probably get to the same place.
By default, it takes it out, right?
Yeah.
Because it's closed, no service.
Okay, I want to get a little bit of control left. So, Mayor Stewart, you're next, and then Councillor Hendricks.
No, I made the point.
You made your point, Councillor Hendricks.
This goes back to our min. You brought it here. You brought us these issues. I think it's unfortunate that it's here. It's unfortunate that it's being laid out this way. I think this council did an excellent job of explaining where we were prior to these options showing up. I think we're still there. So I think you've heard it loud and clear. And I expect that we're going to come back with an option that makes sense. And on September the 11th, when we can actually dictate, make a motion, vote on something, then we'll get the brass tacks going on this process and get it back to where we thought it was, which is an understanding of how this thing is going to be phased out and how it's going to be built. To be bringing it here and we have a whole different approach, that's not fair to this council, I don't think.
Councillor Van Hooker.
Thank you, Councillor Hendricks. When this was presented yesterday afternoon and I had a look at it, I was quickly stopped what I was doing and printed it out and looked at it and figured, oh my goodness, how much political will does this erode to make these decisions, which I quite frankly didn't think we were going to be making either. Thank you for putting that forward. Back to my questions. I have a couple pages of them, but I want to try and start high level and work down. Question for Mr. Carey. By the way, I support.
Yeah, can we just get that clear before we go into the other questions?
Hang on, you don't have the chair, I do. So
I would
finish, please.
support Councillor Monkoff-Swain's comments around option 3. I still want to stay high level a little bit and talk about, I've coined it user leakage. I don't know if that's a good frame, a good reference or not, and revenue loss scenarios. We're staying big picture. So we're not talking about option 3, we're talking about numbers 1 and 2. And we try to keep a facility open, and we have if we talk about option 1, we have 2 periods of time that it's open. So you have users using the facility, and then you have a shutdown, and then you have that period in the middle that, gosh darn, we better hit, as Mr. Hiltz has said. But in between there, besides the user groups that are programmed, in the past, in your experience where there's been 2 shutdowns, do users flock back to that 4 months, or is that somewhat of a pipe dream? I ask, not facetiously at all. I wonder this, right? That's what I've coined user leakage. People have found somewhere else to go. They've found something else to do, and they're going to come back when the grass is planted. The kids can play around, and we can go inside and disperse and do our thing. So I'll stop there with that question.
That was a question.
That's a question to Mr. Carey to speak to user leakage and that piece in the middle. Who comes back besides the teams?
Right. I think, and we talked about this before the meeting, I think one of the most critical things in any one of these programs is your messaging during construction and controlling the expectation of the public. You want to keep the excitement up that you're building something bigger, better, and wonderful. And that takes a lot of work in terms of imaging and messaging. And secondly, to control the expectation, well, those people that choose to remain to use the facility in a degraded fashion understand why it's happening. When that's done right, I think it tends to go well. But I've had an experience where the municipality did not manage that on a very large facility, and it was political disaster for a lot of people and financially for contractors. So it's got to be managed really well. And that's my caveat, my only, where I say, well, the pool, we could keep that pool open for a long, long time. I brought up my concern with the parking. Maybe we'll find a way to mitigate that. I've got some ideas. Whether or not we could get it through planning, I don't know. The fitness, I think we need to have that discussion. And I like what you were saying, is rather than saying what's this, what's that, and what's the timeline, the expectation, the message, if I could take away one thing, I think I've heard the message on the pool. Ideally, the pool is open for as long as possible, as much as possible, and you keep the shutdowns to the absolute minimum that we originally talked about. I think that's probably paraphrasing.
It's a good summary.
Yeah, good
what
summary.
I've heard so far, although some people haven't spoken.
The fitness, I'm in limbo, because I'm hearing things from a construction advice that the amount of disruption, the frequency of disruption, can we just shut down the fitness? Now, if you can give me some clear direction, from what you're hearing from the public over the last 24 hours, if it's what the heck, you're closing the fitness, what were you thinking? And that's the loud and clear, then I think we have to come back and find a way to keep the fitness open.
Well, on that point, though, we haven't had it out there long enough to enough people to really, I don't know what Councillor Monkoff-Swain has heard. I've only had a chance to talk to one person about it since yesterday. So really, for us to say we've heard a certain thing, we can't really, I don't think I can say that myself, but maybe others can. Councillor Danlick, do you want to jump in at all, or
I had a thought.
taking it all in?
Come back to me in a moment if you don't mind, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Stout, anything before we ask the same?
I'm feeling the same way as Councillor Hendricks. I don't think I could put it very much better than he just did. I'm not sure why. I'm not making a decision here, so I'm not sure what I'm being asked to do, other than provide some fairly high-level policy direction. And really, that's going to be. Well, I'm certainly not in favour of anything that's not going to come in on budget with suitable contingencies, and I'm certainly very much in favour of absolutely minimising pool closures. Clearly, there is going to be some pool closure. It was originally 2 months. Now it's, what's that, 7.5 on the least option. And yeah, I'm not quite sure whether a 7.5, two closures totaling 7.5 months is better than one closure for, what is it, 12 or 13? I'm not sure that I'm qualified or knowledgeable enough to make that decision. But
Let him finish. Are you done? Well, it's a comma, not a period, so I'm waiting.
yeah, that's really all I've got to say, yeah.
Well, and I think that's what we're here to do, is to share this thoughts.
I certainly feel that, closing, we've already heard from Councillor Mokoff-Swain that he certainly wants to remove the option 3 altogether, and Mayor Stewart has referred to it already as political suicide, and even
I don't think option 3 is going through. From what
even
Council said.
aside from that, I can't in good conscience vote for that. To close, having told everybody that we're going to expand the facility and it's going to meet a lot of needs, and then but by the way, we're closing it for 2 years. That's I'm sorry, not acceptable to me on any level. So really it comes down to, can we bring it into budget? What's the minimum closure of the pool that we can have?
Can I just add to this, though, in that same vein, saying that the pool shut down for 2 years or thereabouts is not acceptable. I've heard some people say the gym closed down for 2 years is not acceptable. So again, we're only talking about one part of it, and there seems to be a louder voice for one than the other.
Okay, and all right, I'll speak to that just briefly then. I have some personal. I have a little bit of skin in the game here because I use the fitness centre much more than I use the pool personally. That said, there are other fitness facilities in town that I could use. There isn't another pool. If I'm, we've already referred, if I want to use the pool, then I'm basically taking a trip out to Leduc whilst it's closed.
Which is interesting because they were looking at partnering with others, and around the gym, again, you can partner with others. You can with the pool as well.
So yes, I have less concerns about it.
It is interesting that we treat them somewhat different, but
if the construction advice is that the fitness centre needs to be closed, then reluctantly I have to accept that and offer as a palliative that there are alternatives, but there isn't an alternative using the pool.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Mayor Stewart.
I'll speak that in a second. I'm going to drag this back up to a higher level comment. I think what we're hearing, the reason we're having this meeting tonight is because the BRK option, which was Plan A, has come back as economically unfeasible, and that's why we're here having this conversation talking about further options.
Yes.
Right? And so we are going to have to give some type of direction because Plan A is not feasible. So, having said that, I agree. Like the fitness center, I'd like to see it stay open as long as possible, but honestly, that is really fairly easy to mitigate by partnering with existing facilities in town. So if it closes for 2 years, I think we can handle that by partnering fairly quickly and fairly easily. The pool, on the other hand, it's the only pool in town. There's nobody else to really partner without sending people into town. So keeping that, and I think we're getting that sense today, is keeping that pool open as long as possible and minimizing the shutdowns is sort of the way we want to go. I don't know if that brings clarity or...
Except I have a question for you now. Where did it say in what we received this week that Plan A is no longer feasible?
He just said it today.
He said it today, but did you know that ahead of time? I never heard that.
No.
Okay.
And let me step back, if I may, on the BR2 plan to do the phasing was driven by keeping parking. If I heard correctly tonight, the tone in the room is the parking is not the issue that I perceived it to be. So therefore, if we can live with parking further afield up to the north,
Down the street to the south.
then That's off the table. We don't need to phase the construction, piling, and steel, because we've got a parking lot solution. We can keep, and that BR2 plan had keeping the pool open for a very long period of time.
So we could go back to that
So
if
we can-
parking's not an issue.
Yeah, like, if we can, the great thing is you're telling me, I didn't hear anybody want to shoot me over the parking, everything else seems to have gone over about that way, but the parking, if we solve the park, if the parking can live where that is, and if we can go back to saying we're going to deal with the end shutdown of the pool, and the minimal disruption to pool for elevator, addition to the stairs, structural tie-in, and that would be limited, maybe that's after hours, maybe that's, we give a notice of it's for a 4-week period, whatever. And with respect to the last component, which is the fitness, if we go back and say we can keep the fitness open for even half the time, that may come back as more of a win.
Ms. Mohammed, may I ask a question? Is parking an issue from your perspective?
Something that we can sort out, even parking on the street. There's enough space for parking along the street, along there as well.
Land use-wise, we're okay because
So
we're
that's
treating
like we'd have to
ourselves
figure out a
differently?
parking plan. So,
Yeah.
I want to bring us back to the higher level of how this appeared in front of you in the first place today in terms of options. It's one thing for council, service levels is where council's at, right? Deciding what service levels are for this municipality. The only way, at the instruction out of council so far, is that we wanted to keep the service level as much as possible. But we needed to test that and figure out what does that mean. So 3 options were put before you here. 1, absolutely no service level because it's closed. And then 2 other options that kind of test out where are you sitting on that in terms of your idea of wanting to keep service levels and keep things open as long as possible. So that's really the rationale of why these options are before you today, is to further test that out. What are you looking for? What's acceptable? We've heard today, like the gym, part of that was the gym was going to get shut down. We're hearing at the table, maybe we don't want to shut down all of that time. And those are the instructions that we need for the consultants to be able to come back and say, here you go, here's the plan, here's how we're going to move forward with what you want.
But parking's not an issue from...
We will sort it out.
You'll
There's
figure a
all
way.
sorts of details that will have to, accessibility, parking, all those types of things. But what we need is that direction today of the tolerance and service level, and then from there, the plan will get developed with all those details in it.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilor
So I
Monkowski.
have to be excused. I've made my comments. I look forward to September the 11th.
You're leaving, okay.
Yes, as I told you I would be.
Yes,
Thanks.
6:40, yes, it is 6:40. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks, Brad.
Didn't let the rest of you know that Councilor Hendricks did say he was leaving at 6:40, so my apologies. First, Councilor Monkhoff-Swain, and then Councilor Donlin.
If you're ready to go.
You ready?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a comment. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I respect Councillor Hendrick's comments on early part of the meeting here, but I do want to have some idea. I guess committee of the whole is not to make decisions, right? But when I see options, I had the impression we had to make a decision. So it's just a semantics thing, but my mindset communicating saying I'd make a decision tonight, which I know we're not supposed to in the committee of the whole, but that kind of gives some confusion with us here, but to some extent. But I do think, listening to the learned people's comments on construction and design, options 2 and 3, having such considerable length of time of service shutdowns, we don't get, in my opinion, enough of a financial kickback, sorry, wrong word to use, a financial break on the overall project, and enough construction reduced time to warrant option 2 or 3, in my personal opinion. Option 1, the way it's laid out, does provide minimal closure to the pool area. I don't go to the gym much as I should, obviously, but if we do have the gym closed from day 1, at least the gym patrons know up front now that it's going to be closed for 2 years. They can plan for the next 2 years for themselves, their fitness, by going to our partners at Leduc, local gyms, and they know they've got a definite plan for their fitness needs. That gives them some advantage. It's a pain to lose the gym for 2 years, I get that, but I think if I'm a gym goer, which again, I know I'm not, as much as I should be, at least I know for the next 2 years, I need to go to this gym or that gym. I could try out Leduc and this, or I can try a gym locally and make a decision, right? And that gives them some certainty, which is good. The 2 proposed closures gives our patrons for the pool some degree of certainty as to how long they can use the pool for. I think options 2 and 3, we don't have enough of a win construction time-wise or financially, to entertain option 2 or 3 in any serious matter. My only thought is, as option 1, and going back to the parking for a moment, going on the diagram, if you'll notice that the green that juts out to the left, that's the driveway, right? Well, if my daughter was to the Aquafit, I drop her off every day. As you walk up the front of the Aquafit and you were to drive forward, go left onto the road, it's only about 12 stalls, and you're at that middle of the parking lot. We're not talking about going half a mile further to park, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about 12 stalls northward to where the road juts out. So if you didn't walk this way here, we're not talking huge area of walking. Plus, we're also talking walking in spring and summer months, not in the winter. So I don't think parking is an issue at all. Honestly, I don't. From your earlier assumption, I'm glad we can come back from that. I am leaning towards, I know we can make a decision today, but option 1 does seem to give me the most value for our patrons in terms of some certainty and some timeline. So if I may,
I think there might be some walking in the winter. I'm just double checking. There's some walking in the winter, I think. Yeah. Even in option 1.
The bulk of walking is in the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to clarify.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I'm looking at it maybe too simplistically, but.
Thank you, Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you.
Councillor McGuffey.
Thank you, and I want to be clear here that I started out trying to frame this around in the middle part of my conversation anyway about option 3, and it sounded very negative for a reason. I think is an awful option. But I do want to just acknowledge that this is the long-term vision for this community. It's a 30-year project, which is going to be great for our community. You always indicated that there was going to be some interruption. And I knew that going in. I knew that when I voted for it. So I fully respect that. If you're looking for direction, as the mayor and others are looking have entailed, I'm a big fan of predictability and certainty. So I would disagree with my council colleague here about option 1. Not knowing too much about construction projects, just seeing it from the outside, I think it would be, and I think Mr. Hiltz has mentioned it, I think by trying to commit people and say, yeah, well, we might have 4 months here, and if that slips a month, what does that do? So I think by giving people enough notice for June next year, right? So that's 7-8 months. Giving them 9 months, that's giving them, I think that gives people enough notice, and then it is predictable, and it says that that this is not going to be open, and we can figure out our own funding in terms of what our memberships are going to cost, and we can give that certainty, as opposed to trying to sell a membership here or a click pass that you might be able to use in these 4 months. So my initial direction is around give us predictability and certainty. Obviously, option 3 gives us that as well, just not to my liking. But yeah, that would be my initial point. I did want to talk about parking. I think I'm a pretty reasonable guy, but I haven't heard anyone else have raised concerns about parking. But I will be one that does raise concerns about parking. I know that there is going to be restrictions. I knew it going in, but you've split this off horizontally. I would like you guys to go back and try and figure out if there are different ways to slice and dice that piece of asphalt, and whether it's whether you slice it kind of. I didn't swear there, so that was good. So you're splitting it this way, right? And I'm speaking for someone who's going to walk a 4 and a 2-year-old all the way around here with wet hair. You mentioned before, that's a long way to walk, right? And so I would like to see if there is, again, acknowledging zero construction background, but can we even look at this way and maybe jutting out this way? We've got potential space around on this side here. So the direction from me is. Oh, so just let me finish my point. The direction from me is I'm not 100% happy with this, and I would like you to go back and try and come back with a different parking option, because that is a long way to walk a family member or 2 or 7.
Good point. You don't have to answer it if you don't have an answer right now.
Well, I've always got an answer.
There are other questions you could.
This area here, the building runs on a diagonal, the addition runs on a diagonal like this way. So there is a wedge here that could be potentially pulled back. This area, I don't know, we have a proximity for turning at a corner of a curb. We could potentially gravel this surface, asphalt the edge, introduce parking here, maybe we could run a drive aisle on it like so and get a line of parallel parking. There's options without spending a ton of money to maybe not get the best, but maybe get 20 stalls closer to the building.
So we'll leave that with you, and you'll bring that back to us. Councillor Van Newkirk, and then Councillor Stout.
So I'll continue kind of where I left off at the user leakage kind of scenarios, and I'll probably end up where Councillor Monkoff-Swain has ended up here. So if we look at an option one and we have two windows that things are closed, we have a gap in the middle that we're going to try our best to hit, but likely won't. We're going to be worrying about managing expectations, managing construction site, managing safety, and dealing with weather and taking what comes. It's a lot of variables to try and hit that piece. Project manager myself scares me. It's similar to Mr. Hiltz's comments earlier. If we get to a spot where we say, we want to close, we want to give certainty, similar to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, but we in the back of our mind, we want to keep everything open for as long as we can, and we're not managing expectations well, that's not going to go over very well, right? Conversely, if we go to a whole bunch of effort to keep it open and we do well, and no one shows up, we're twiddling our thumbs and there's crickets, it's like, oh goodness, well, we worked our tails off to get here, and we have our users, and we've given certainty, and no one believed we were going to do it, and everyone else people have moved on. And I worry about that, and this is just me talking through it, because I think that's what we're here today, is we're here to talk through that and what it could be, and those are realities. We could do a really good job, and then our users may go. So we're going to have our defined users which aren't going to go, and I've heard from them, I've talked to them, and I value that a lot. And I want to keep that open. I want to provide certainty, close the door on number 3, but then there's parking. 7 and 5-year-old, wet hair, coming around the corner. I'm the guy that's dropping the family off, picking up at the door, and looking at drop-off and pickup zones. And, I'm not going to sit here and dictate what parking may look like. Ms. Mohammed and her group are the group to do that, and they're the right group to do that and make those decisions, because you understand setbacks, corners, backup, sideways, turning radiuses, visibility, all that kind of stuff. So that's where I'll stop from that. I do have concerns with the big green area, because I don't think I've ever parked in there to go to the Aquafit, and most of the time that's been reserved for parking for people who have hopped a bus and then left town. I'll speak to that group. I don't know if question for administration, does that group still have an expectation of needing some parking, or is that done what maybe Mr. Hills can comment?
Thank you, committee member. Is that we've had discussions with them in the past, and that's basically a temporary solution as we work through this. They were parking in residential areas and taking up parking, so we offered up the Aquafit Center. They do know that this is coming to an end. So it's, there'll be a change of habits. They'll have to take time to get there, but they do know it's coming to an end.
Yeah, so my point is that there are parking concerns from myself, so that's why I was kind of talking with my eyes there earlier, but it's, I do have those concerns. I'll stop there, let others comment, and then I'll continue on shortly.
Mr. Hilton, and I have a question for you.
Kind of further, I think, Committee Chair, is kind of further to what Ms. Mohammed had indicated is in terms of like service levels and throwing this out there. We really felt that this was an important conversation to have before September 11th, and this was the reason why these options are put in front of you. We've had numerous discussions with Clark in terms of pushback, and they probably are quite probably almost when it's like he's calling again. Kind of thing when we're having these things. So, but we think it's important that you guys have this, because it'd be worse that if we came on the 11th with a real surprise, and that would be worse. And so I appreciate Councillor Hendricks went with his comments, but we were never set in stone, and we want to make sure that we bring forward a product that works, because our number one goal is the price. Like really, it's public safety and meeting that price. And so that's those things where we've really kind of, as we took as the gospel from council as we worked through the last couple of years. And so I just want to make sure we're clear on that. We're not doing this to throw council under the bus. We're not doing this to make our lives easier, because they're not. But we're doing this because September 11th is a very important date for us if we want to get fall construction.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to something that Councillor Van Newkirk asked you? Mr. Hilt, in option 2, when you talk about the closure from June 1st, the permanent closure time, there are operating costs to the staff of the pool. And do those staff, what happens?
Right now, what happens with the staff is we will keep all full-time staff will be assigned to other positions within the town, so those full-time staff would not be impacted. We will be working to mitigate with casual staff. There's a lot of contract positions. There are summer camps in the summertime. There's all those things that they'll be assigned to. So we're working through all those mitigations right now to make sure we can work with as many. The City of Leduc has also indicated, because they're expecting more pool users there, they'll take some of the staff. So we are trying to work through all those plans right now to be able to accommodate as many as possible.
There really isn't a corresponding savings on another side. I don't mean as part of this project, but
there would be. The savings would come is that the pool operates at a 60% deficit. And so it's closed, you have those savings from an operational perspective. Some of those savings would be used up through, staff working in other areas, et cetera, but there would be some savings.
And my last, idea to just throw out there for you to think about, is there anything within the CCBCC space that could be temporary for any of the gym equipment? Does that kind of open up a whole big can of worms? We don't want to go there.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. We did open up that debate.
Okay.
Just in terms of our commitment to a number of user groups out there, we'd never be able to find something consistently, and we'd be upsetting one user group for another user group. We've actually looked at the Ken Nickel as an opportunity. We've looked at lobbies. We've looked at different things, and probably our best bet would be to partner with some of the private. And they specialize in that, and that would be probably the cleanest.
Well, I appreciate you looking into those. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Bannock.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A couple of my colleagues on council, I think, are kind of leaning towards the option 2, and part of the discussion today is to keep an open mind, which I'm very much trying to do with this. And I do understand the idea of certainty for our patrons. I'm trying to think from a swim club perspective or a gym user perspective. I mean, if we did lean towards the option 2 and our patron had one full year from now to realize that we'll be closing for a full year, they can do some planning differently. That may make it easier for you guys for construction, but I guess I want to ask Clark Builders, if I could, your thoughts on our concerns being raised about the parking. Can it be tweaked somehow? Is it feasible? I mean, we're asking for it to be tweaked, but you guys are the experts on the site and the construction needs. Can it be tweaked? Is it reasonable to expect some kind of tweaking with the parking?
Looking at it, where the south lot is closed, that's where the new field house is going.
Right.
Okay. Outside of the building, there's new site services going in there. So new water lines, fire hydrants. There also needs to be space for construction equipment to travel around the building. So looking at this drawing, I can't tell offhand, but we could sit down with Jim and do some sort of a layout to make sure that there's a safe distance for vehicle traffic and patrons on the outside of the fence and construction access on the inside of the fence. But I can't answer that right now. Looking at it, it would be very tight, but we'll look at it.
Yeah. I just get some idea if you said there's no way we can do this.
I don't. Our biggest concern, as you've seen in our slideshow, there is safety of the public. We need separation. We don't want any chance of somebody dropping a nail on the hood of a car from a lift. You know what I mean? Like it's best.
Or a
to
little
have
child
that
getting
safe
hurt when a hammer falls or something.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would look at it. I can't answer right now, though, if it's even possible or if we'd be happy with it, I should say.
Fair enough.
Councillor Van Newkirk?
Working my way through the list here, I've mapped it out from a little graph chart here for myself, and options 1 and 2, we're looking at the shutdowns in June. We're having a discussion here tonight in absence of connecting wholeheartedly with some of our user groups who we're trying to consider here tonight. So we're sitting here trying to consider groups that I've connected with as much as possible. And thanks for the attendance tonight. Appreciate it a lot to listen to this. But might there be appetite to gain feedback from those groups and look at June and look at shifting that line on on shutdowns. I don't know what impacts are made and what construction considerations are made have, but the toughest thing for me tonight is trying to make a decision without, well, not trying to provide a feeling of direction for guidance for September 11th, and but not knowing and maybe not gaining as much feedback as we could. So maybe just comments.
Councillor Hills? Councillor Hills, I just gave you a new job. Mr. Hills?
I respectfully decline. Thank you, committee members.
Come on over to the dark side.
What we've kind of heard tonight is that that we want to kind of mitigate some of the shutdowns and some of the timings and stuff like that. So we've got a very clear message on this, and we come back for the 11th. We'll be able to hopefully have something that's a little bit more palatable between options 1 and 2. There will be shutdowns. We do know that that's going to be a reality here. There was a shutdowns in the original proposal that came forward. We can, we'll reach out through the aquatic team and we'll have those conversations with both the swim club and the sinker club and stuff like that. Where is their least amount of impact? Because there will be impacts to them, and there was going to be always impacts to them, and we'll have those discussions over the next couple of weeks. Again, the time is ticking. In this whole process, we were on a very aggressive timeline, but we'll be able to do that. We'll have where do they think? But they have to also understand that they will be impacted, and where can we come in and will be the least amount for that period. We kind of moved the schedule once already. Like Clark had kind of a different scenario kind of set up. We said no, we can't. We have to start in June because of the swim club, when their bookings are. So we'll have that face to face. Okay.
Thank you for the response.
Thank you for that, Councillor Munkoff-Swain. And I think this is kind of, we're getting towards the end of this. Seems like.
I'm seeing consensus.
Yeah, let's hear.
Okay.
Okay.
I still got things to say, but I just want to build off that point there. Actually, let me ask a dumb question first. You talk about the South Park enclosed because that's where the field house is going. Are we starting the field house first and could potentially start the ice rink first and then the field house second and therefore opening up that parking lot, or do you need it for staging area?
Yeah, no, the foundation the plan is to have it all go at once, right? There's about 588 piles that have to be installed on the facility, so we're hoping to have a couple of piling rigs, and we're going to be working from the south and working our way to the north.
That's a lot of piles.
Someone's going to ask me, and if I didn't know the answer, I'd be embarrassed, so thank you. I'll try and sound smart when I answer it like that. But I wanted to build off what Councillor Van Newkirk had mentioned about engaging with the groups. I'm hoping that there's going to be enough information for us to be able to provide a decision on the 11th here, but I'm hoping there is still a little bit of flexibility potentially, because 2 weeks isn't a lot of time, and I know that I was informed that there is, just because that's when the club finishes, yes, but there's also provincials and nationals, all that sort of stuff that we need to stay training for. So when we make a decision on the 11th, are we locked into, okay, you're going to come up with us June 1st and we're locked into that? Or is there still time in the fall to be able to engage with those groups and really try and figure out what is the best window? That would be my hope, so I'm just interested.
Part of the considerations and risks identified that, there are a lot of components in there that could change these dates, right? We don't know exactly when a building permit is going to be issued. So those are all things that could play a factor as to when we get started. So suddenly, some of those dates may shift a little bit, right?
I think to add to that, yes. If you say no, we can't, just for an example, we can't shut down on June 1st, it's going to be June 16th because we have, of course, we're going to accommodate that. So.
Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Is that it? Mayor Stewart, anything else? Councillor Van Newkirk.
So currently there's a shutdown planned in September for the facility. Does option 1 or 2 negate the necessity of that shutdown, or does that shutdown have to occur, as I understand it, to do the things we're not going to do during the HVAC pump and building envelope work we do in the future?
I'm going to let our Amanda speak to that. She's a recreation and culture manager who's been kind of assigned to the shutdown. I think she'll be able to give a better answer than I can.
Hello there. Yes, we have a shutdown coming up starting this September. So we're going into our annual shutdown. So typically we would see a shutdown happen in aquatic centers. So you're looking at draining the pool water, doing maintenance to filters, scrubbing the pool basin. So this is just general maintenance that we do every year, pretty much like your deep clean. So instead of doing spring cleaning, we do it in the fall. So what we're doing for our closure is literally just draining our pool, cleaning it up, doing a good scrub. Same with the fitness center. We're closing down for a few days just to do a big clean and do some preventative maintenance and some maintenance that needs to be done. So it doesn't affect anything as far as Aquafit Phase 2. This is just our general maintenance.
Thanks for that clarity.
Thank you. Good answer. Okay, I think we've given, no, we're not. We're not finished yet. Okay, Councilor Van Ikker.
Yeah, I've got quite a few more questions here.
Quite a few more?
That I'd like to get through, yeah.
You got
Okay.
a couple of themes you can sort of consolidate.
Can, yeah, can you
I do.
tell us the whole bunch so they can answer it more?
Take your time, mate.
Swing team / Excel synchro, because I have organized my thoughts. I'm going to read you my bullet points, and then we'll choose who's going to, I guess, answer that. Parents and board members have contacted me, some in attendance tonight. Many national level athletes, disruptions are difficult in training coaching. I think we've found that. Worst case scenario is we make decisions that uncertainty brings movement of athletes. We're exporting talent. We're exporting talent in athletes or coaches. I wouldn't want to be part of those types of decisions and contributing to something like that. If we start, when you bleed a color and you jump and you go and, you bleed blue and you go to red, and all of a sudden you're red and red's accepted you, and all of a sudden it's time to go back to blue. That's a disruptive thing.
Yeah, it is.
There's a huge mental aspect to sport, and it's tough. Our synchro team, they're around the region and they're at different facilities. If they move, do they come back? So that's my bullet points there, and I'd look for comment or response, I guess, from admin or BR2's experience.
Are you wondering which option would be better? Is that what you're going with?
Impact people. Impact on people.
As committee members, first and foremost, yes, we know that there's going to be impacts, and those are going to be really difficult to get around. Even if we decided that, let's say you decided, we're not going to go forward with the Aquafit Center. We're just going to Aquafit 2. We're just going to maintain the pool. We're not going to do the other things. We're going to build separate facilities. We have enough that we have to do to the pool at its 10 years of age that it's going to have a 1-year shutdown. We have enough structural issues that we have enough other issues in that facility with its HVAC systems and things like that we have to be shut down for an extended period of time to be able to meet that facility moving forward. So these things are going to happen regardless if we do it as part of this or we did it with something else. Like that's just kind of a part of that reality over the next couple of years.
That's a very good point, and
So
I think it's good to see that tonight, right?
So that's where we're kind of, and this actually allows us to do a lot of that stuff while we're kind of working through these other processes. It makes sense to do it. We can share the systems. We can do those kind of things like that, meeting the modern building codes, all those things, and have a really efficient facility at the end of it. My experience in these type of things when I've been involved in shutdowns, and I was involved in Saskatoon Fieldhouse, for example, that was shut down for 10 months. And over that period of time, because it was the third new floor construction that they needed, and they had to bore down into the floor almost 30 feet in places and recompact and build it up and put the new surface in. It was quite a major upgrade. Within a few months, everybody's back. Even with the staff, even with the staffing levels and things like that you find when you have a major shutdown in an aquatic facility that's 4 or 5 months, everybody comes back but 3 people. And those things may have happened anyways. We don't know. We don't have the crystal ball to really look in the future that way. But if the program and the space is there, the opportunity is there to compete in your hometown and stuff like that, those facilities are there. They're going to be competing and trying to get those lanes in other communities that don't exist. They do come back, and it's tough. This is some of those fights that we've had internally on this project, is how do we mitigate and minimize those impacts.
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of why I didn't want to just put a nail in this discussion, because we have experience in the room. There's questions out there, and what you just shared is very important. There's enough building envelope, HVAC and pump issues. We're looking at an extended shutdown for the pool, even if we scrap the whole works.
Yeah.
The pool still needs love.
Yeah.
And so here we are. I think that's kind of
several millions of dollars.
Right? It's kind of a revelation tonight. I led you down the path because you and I had chatted before about your experience in the former facilities and stuff. And I think knowing that, and yes, it's anecdotal, but I think it adds to the conversation that on the back end, if you build it, they will come, yes, and people do return, and you might lose, like you say, figuratively, a smaller percentage, right? So thank you for sharing that. That's important. I'll open the floor before I get into the next section here.
Can I
Councillor Stout.
ask a question then? I just want to clarify something you just said, Mr. Hill. So, did I hear you correctly? The pool is in the condition that it requires something like something at the order of a 12-month shutdown costing several millions of dollars.
Well, I can't speak to the length. I use that as kind of anecdotal number, but there's 12, in the building envelope study that was done for the Aquafit Center a couple of years ago, there's 12 recommendations, and it's basically, it is improvements to the HVAC system. There's structural issues. There are accessibility things. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen in that facility that would require very much an extended shutdown.
So by extended, we're talking
It could be anything
months?
between 6 months and a year. Until we really get into the nuts and bolts of what that structure is, then that really does, I can't speak to that. Maybe Mr. Carey or Clark can speak to that a bit better than I can, but it is significant.
I'm not going to hold you to the number. I just wanted to get a feel for whether we were talking weeks, months, years. But did you have
Well, I
any
think
comment?
if you did just the mechanical, you'd be 4 months. If you do the mechanical, the roof, you could probably make it 5 or 6, but if you do everything on the list, I think 8 months at a minimum is what you shut that thing down for. Because we're talking about doing things like the lobby, the elevator as well. So, and we're picked up all those things in this work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And really, if you're going to go for an extended, get everything done.
Yeah.
You don't have to do multiple over the next 5 years.
You taking turns? Are you gonna
Well,
finish?
I got a list and I took
Well,
time to
I'm just suggesting you put the whole list out there so we can get,
Everybody's waiting on you now, so.
Yeah, so I was asked to put it in theme, respectfully, right? So then that's how I wrote it as my
Okay,
talk.
keep going.
Aquafit users, so, and these are questions the public has asked, right? Like, I'm not sitting up here asking stuff that didn't want to be asked. It's been a busy 24 hours, and I have paid a lot of attention. I have engaged with a lot of people and taken the time to do that and to prepare for the meeting, so respect it. Aquafit users, swimming lessons, so there's lessons you sign up for, and then there's school lessons, and by having the conversation tonight, it opens up uncertainty. And then we have classes and programming. We have trainers. We have annual passes. One of the things I bugged Mr. Hills for this morning was, try and quantify a bit, for folks around what does it look like for pass holders? What does it look like for membership? What does it look like for folks that we're going to impact in the gym versus annual pass holders versus through the gate turnstile stuff? And Mr. Hill said he could provide some high-level numbers. I see he's got some, so if we could share a little bit of that, I think it's important to put perspective to what we're talking about for impact.
So right now, from an annual membership perspective, people who have annual 12-month memberships, this is actually a really good timing because we have 140. So the number is manageable in that kind of a sense and stuff like that. For monthly memberships, and those are the people that buy from month to month spaces and stuff like that. For the month of July, we sold 426 of those monthly the passes and stuff. The monthly passes have become much more popular than the annual passes. And then we also have 3-month memberships. So we have 58 people at the moment with a 3-month pass. Maybe if we went back a month into June, we can add maybe 74 on there roughly. So maybe about 150 people have a 3-month pass. And And then we have, did you want, which other kind of stats? Just general.
generally,
So,
you know,
yeah, so.
just to put it.
Yeah, so we would have to be, like, so those are some of the people that we'd be working with and mitigating, like, do you put your pass on hold, for example? Do you move it over to one of the private providers? And then, you know, kind of things. So those are the things that we're mitigating and working on right now. And you know, we want to have a fairly solid plan out that when people said, I got my pass, what do I do with it? They'll have the choice. They could keep it and then extend it. They could, you know, we'd probably provide a refund on it. If they really wanted a refund on it, they could go to one of the private providers.
Yeah, thank you for that. Keeping going, I guess, staff. So we've heard some of the stuff around staff. You know, we try to get full-time staff where we can and mitigate those types of things. You know, what happens to them in any scenario. I think you've kind of answered through that. You know, how they can been communicated with up to this point in the last 24-hour period. It has been tough. But speaking with Avis and Young, yes, their presentation was short, but I can really see a push in turning that dial from 2 to 10 on the communication side of stuff. So, you know, I'll kind of leave that there for now, but I really want to see a high level of communication with everything that we do moving forward. And I think it was really good to put Avis and Young in the conversation tonight, because it shows a commitment and understanding that it's going to take some extra help. You know, and I have some ideas around that, which I'll throw outside of this, and that's good. We haven't, I'm not sure if Councillor McGough-Swain wants to get in, or I'll keep going. But
You're on fire, mate. Keep going.
Okay, right on. You know, they do their thing. They're mobile. I know it's going to affect them. I do want to acknowledge that I'm not blind to that as I make decisions. Dog park, no one said that yet tonight. Here it comes. So, you know, administration was provided earlier to provide some options, and you know, we'll look forward to seeing what they might be and where they may be, and because no matter what scenario, you know, the impending doom for the dog park, you know, it's the red line across my chart. So
we have, so just further to that, thank you for that question, is we have looked at a few smaller areas, some in that area, some in some different areas in town. And part of this whole process is once we kind of get the green light to move, then we'll start having those community conversations with the dog park people, plus the residents that may be affected by having a temporary dog park by them. This dog park is temporary, and that has been very clearly communicated throughout the last few years. The people who were the founders of the dog park are well aware of that as well. We do not, you know, until we get to that point and through the Parks and Recs master plan, those are some of the conversations we'll be having about that permanent, like trying to identify some permanent places so they would be able to have something more permanent. So it's going to be temporary to temporary. And it may not be October 1st, them opening, but it will be within a period of time.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the point is that, you know, it's
on the table.
It's not forgotten.
It's not lost.
And it's not lost, and it's, you know, it's not fast, but it's not slow, right? Like it's there. 2 more bullet points. There was some comments made and that I've seen and that I've been asked around residents at community engagement events being told there wouldn't be any closures. I was always eyes wide open in that, you know, there's money to spend on the pool, we have to tie in HVAC, all that stuff. I always understood there'd be a closure. I don't know if there was some misrepresented information out there at our engagement events. If there was, you know, I would apologize to those people who received that information, because it was nothing that I would have ever thought, and I don't think I ever heard from admin that there was not going to be a disruption, just for maybe clarity on that.
No, I think that the message that we have always kind of put forward was that we're looking at minimizing as much as possible. And, you know, given the you know, now that we're kind of like, you know, you're in the design phase, everything is kind of at this high level and everything's moving really nicely and everything. When we get into the construction management, Clark in, this is where you get the mess starts happening. They're starting to challenge and question the design. The trades are questioning the design. And these are what's happening is we're getting all of this information. That's what's kind of coming out with the phasing. And so we wouldn't have used the language, there's not going to be a closure. But, you know, we're always kind of working to be, how do we work with the community, or how do we work with this facility to be able to minimum impact that, or to try to work with that as best as we can. So that's all the best I can probably answer that at this time.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. Someone could have said something, or.
That's right. But no matter what was said, you know, tonight is where we're at, and that's what the reality looks like. One nuts and bolts question, then I'll stop for now. On facility openness, Clark Builders or Mr. Carey, on facility opening, do we have grass to stand on? Do we have dirt to stand on? When we say facility opening on those dates, just for ultimate clarity, we can go inside and use the facility, the interior of the facility. Can we also use the exterior of the facility, or is there still concrete and asphalt to be done? Maybe just a comment on what does it actually mean to do facility opening on the dates that we've got put there.
So yeah, upon facility opening, well, basically everything that's in the design documents would be complete, would be substantially complete. There's likely going to be some ongoing balancing work, that sort of thing, with HVAC and systems and electrical systems, working out the bugs. But the intent is to be complete, ready for the patrons, all levels. Right?
Yeah, I think that's an important closing piece, and I left it for closing because it's a managing expectation thing. The last slide in your presentation was a nice view, and that's what, when I say facility opening, it's like, that's the one, right? Yeah. So just, that's kind of my closing thought.
Further to that, just, in terms of managing expectations and things, there will be areas that will be fenced off from the public because turf and grass and things like that do need to establish. And there could be a part of landscaping that's not completed yet, but that won't affect people being able to enjoy the facility. So we just have to make sure there's your completion, your substantial completion, and your final completion, and where we can get in the facility and kind of be able to use it, versus there's still going to be stuff happening even during that first year inside the facility and outside the facility. Okay?
Yeah, I think the clarity is important, right? Because what does it mean to open a facility? Yeah. Thank you. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else?
Just a final comment from me. I think you did a great job. Thank you for explaining those themes. For me, is around change management, and you touched on a little bit, but with Avis and Young, we could have the greatest project in the world, but if it's not communicated properly, we all lose around this table. And so, while I respect the nuts and bolts side of things, if we don't get this part right, the whole thing is a failure. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you're coming up with. I know there are folks on council that are very keen and participant observers around this, and I will offer, and my interim CEO might kick me under the table, but I'll offer any support or guidance that when you're thinking about what is the community thinking, what are they feeling. Our job is to have a pulse on the community, whether we have the right one or not, that could be debated, but I would offer that up, that if you are looking for what has worked in the past, what hasn't, obviously you've got your administration here, but also we as council members hear things differently, hear from different people, and so I would just offer that up, that if you're looking for that, I would encourage you to reach out to council in different formats to be able to provide that input. So that, to me, that is the biggest part of this project. I'm really glad you're here, and I think we'll be successful with it. So those are my last comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any parting comments from anyone else?
So we're clear?
Have you got enough feedback?
I think I got it. Yeah.
Okay, all in? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Is there any appetite change in the name of this project?
Yes, please.
Now?
Yeah.
Call it the Beaumont Sport and Rec Center rather than the Aquafit 2.
Beaumont Sport and Rec Center.
At least until Rob.
Can I just check what that acronym is first?
Sells
No, I think
the
it's
naming
BSR.
Sport recreation.
Kind of meet with the BSR.
I think we should give it a French name. I think it should be Beaumont Allée de Sport.
Well, you could do that, but then, we can have that at the front end, and then have that at the back end. And then you have and then what they call, whatever you call it.
Were you serious on that?
I am dead serious.
Did you the alphabets too?
I don't think
Martin's after the spring front grants from the federal government.
So do you want us to,
Can we bring
some options?
Can we bring a request for decision on the 11th with the name change to this? Because
Is that enough
it's no
time?
longer really an Aquafit.
Is that enough time?
Well, I'll just bring back a couple options, like not options, but with a direction.
That might take longer
No,
than
like,
the
not to go like this, but I'll just pick a couple, and just if you guys like to know some, in terms of, because basically through this whole process, we're looking at sponsorship and things. The easiest names to change are ones that, like the Beaumont Sport and Rec Center. And plus, the nice thing about the name of the Beaumont Sport and Rec Center is it hits a nail on the head. You don't have to think about what it is.
It's exactly what it is.
It's like Leduc Recreation Center, or the LRC. It's like, it's pretty obvious what happens there. And when you get those other names, it becomes much more confusing.
I do like the ring of Pelly to sports.
I think we have to think about the francophone area.
Yeah, we'll have to do that too.
Councillor Monco's right.
So I promised myself I wouldn't bring up sponsorships, but you did, so now I get a go.
You guys can go.
And this isn't going to be a question, or I won't wax lyrical on too long. Could you, part of the conversation back on the 11th, could you just provide some background, because I know a lot of people ask about it. Could you just provide what is our process for how we're going to be engaging around this? I know there are a lot of people who want us to, sell the rights to the naming rights, but there's also a lot of people who, would like to name a dressing room after their legacy family here in community. So you don't need to get into it now, but on the 11th, if you could just bring a report back on roughly how we're planning about going this.
It may not, just for council, it may not be ready for the 11th, and the reason I say that is we are working with an outside consultant on the plan for the Aquafit Center right now, and through economic development, so both of our departments are kind of working together on this, and how we'll be working on the sponsorship package. So that may not be there. We can give a very high level, like two sentences.
No.
But we're not going to have any real details.
My bad. Come back when you're ready. I just want to make sure that there's a lot of appetite to hear about what those options are, and so both from an admin council perspective, but also a communication perspective. So thank you.
Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's only 2 weeks away. September 11th is only 2 weeks away, which means a lot of work for everybody has to do here. So I know council really appreciates the work you've done so far. The next 2 weeks will be a lot of work more, and we do appreciate that. I know we talked about reaching out to some of the local clubs and groups who use the facilities. I'm sure we do that for sure if we can. And the communication piece is going to be huge too. I think, as Councillor Moncott-Swain mentioned, I think to me, besides Clark's involvement, your involvement will be probably even more pivotal, because if we screw up the communication of this, it's going to look really bad for us. We have a fantastic building, but if we don't communicate it in the entire next 2-year process, it'll really hurt us, I think. So communication, I think, is even more important than the actual facility. Not that you guys aren't important, but there's politically speaking, it's really important that we communicate to our patrons, to our citizens who'll be disrupted by parking and so on. It's going to be a challenge for us as a council and as administration and our patron and our suppliers. So I do appreciate your efforts now. It's going to be a busy 22 months. It really will. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're done with that item. And we should probably be done with the meeting. I don't think there's any in cameras. Any information items from administration now? And adjournment. We don't need motions. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.